The Benjamin Dixon Show is only possible with listener support. Go to www.thebenjamindixonshow.com to register for our blog and join the Progressive Army. And now, ladies and gentlemen,
you're now about to witness the truth.
It's the Benjamin Dixon Show.
See, that's what happens when you change your tie at the last second without looking at the mirror. Welcome to the Benjamin Dixon Show. I am your host, Benjamin Dixon. It is Super Tuesday 4. How many Super Tuesdays are there going to be? Anyway, if you're just tuning in, the results are starting to come in all across the 5 states that voted today. So in Connecticut, Bernie Sanders is still holding a slight lead over Hillary Clinton. I believe the current count right now is 50.4% for Bernie Sanders, 47.7% for Hillary Clinton. Donald Trump is Trump across the board. It's been called for Donald Trump in Connecticut, Delaware, Maryland, Pennsylvania, and Rhode Island. Good luck, Republicans, with the contested convention. So that's not going to end well for you. In Delaware, Hillary Clinton is ahead by 20 points. 20.5 points. Hillary Clinton has a 59.7 to a 39.2% lead in Delaware. In Maryland, Hillary Clinton, it has already been called. I'm sorry. Wait a minute. What am I saying? In Delaware, it's been called for Hillary Clinton. In Maryland, it's been called for Hillary Clinton. In Pennsylvania, it's been called for Hillary Clinton. And Bernie Sanders is still holding a lead, a pretty healthy lead in Rhode Island. 56.9 for Bernie Sanders and 41.5% for Hillary Clinton in Rhode Island. That's where it stands. So it's going to be, it looks like it may end up being possibly a 3-2 split tonight in terms for Hillary Clinton. It is in terms of the Democratic primary. For Republicans, it is a clean sweep for Donald Trump. This is, listen, politically speaking, and if you've been listening to me long enough, I don't have to give these caveats anymore. But this is fascinating what's happening with Donald Trump. It is simply something that no one expected, no one could predict. I guarantee you Donald Trump himself could not predict this level of success. I said it last night, and I have to say it again. It is the perfect storm. It is a perfect season in Republican politics for somebody like Donald Trump to come through and essentially thump the establishment. And apparently enough people just didn't get the message here on the Democratic side, because Hillary Clinton has a commanding lead and has already won 3 of the 5 states tonight, and she has a decent lead in the delegate count. So it's ironic that the Republican Party is experiencing a grassroots, I guess you can call it grassroots, right? As grassroots as the Republicans can actually be, whatever you want to call it, it's the voice of the people. It's the voice of Republican voters, whether you like them or not, whether you think they're proto-fascists, whether you think they're all racist, whether you think they're all morons, whatever descriptor you want to give them, however you want to describe them, the people, the Republican voters, the Republican electorate has spoken. They want Donald Trump. And I'm not sure what would happen if the Republican Party forces someone else down their throat. So we'll keep an eye on the rest of the numbers tonight as they continue to come in. But still, as it stands, Hillary Clinton has been declared the winner in Delaware, in Maryland, and Pennsylvania. And Bernie Sanders holds a lead, a very close lead in Connecticut, and Hillary a very strong lead in Rhode Island. So it looks like he'll come out of here tonight with just enough to keep going. Because with those 3 losses and the delegate count, we have to see what the final split is, particularly in the state where she won definitively, like by 20 points. In Pennsylvania, she won right now. So far, the lead is 17 points. In Rhode Island, well, we already said Rhode Island. I think it was Maryland where she has actually, there are no results from Maryland yet. It's been declared for Hillary Clinton, and there's no precincts reporting yet. But depending on their calculus, I'm sure it's accurate. I've seen this before. With Delaware is the 20-point margin. I want to see the final results. They're at 95.6% reporting from Delaware, so there's a good chance that's not going to change any significant worth anything significant. So I want to see the total delegate count coming out of tonight and see how Bernie Sanders holds on. I'm sure people are going to make videos telling you that Bernie Sanders still has a route to the victory, and people are going to make videos telling you that Bernie Sanders still is the definitive front runner because of X, Y, and Z. But the numbers are starting to add up against Bernie Sanders. Let's see what these final totals are, because even though Hillary Clinton won those 3 states, depending on the margins, everything is awarded proportionately, so they could come out almost even. Or just well, not in the state where she won by 20 points, but in the other 2 states where it's a little closer. Let's see what the final delegate counts are. Yeah, Connecticut is still 47%. So we're just going to keep an eye on these as we go through the night. So tonight I'm going to be joined by Professor Harvey Kaye. He's going to join me at around 9:30, and we're going to talk about. I want to talk about his book, The 4 Freedoms, briefly, but then we're also going to talk about the progressive movement in general, historically, and then project out, where do we go from here? Where do progressives go from here? And I really like his book. I appreciate his insight. So I want to get him a chance to come on the show and share with us. So he'll be on at 9:30. And that's it. So in the meantime, while we wait on some other results, let me go over some news from the day. Let's start with the easy stuff, the low-hanging fruit. Donald Trump tweeted out that he believes that the Democratic Party has done Bernie Sanders wrong, and he hopes that Bernie Sanders would run as an independent. Now, that would be great for him. Bernie Sanders running as an independent is a surefire way for Donald Trump to win the presidency in a 3-way race. No questions asked, because people are going to vote for Bernie Sanders. That's going to divide and split and conquer the Democratic Party and leave the Republican Party strong enough to take the White House. So, of course, Donald Trump wants Bernie Sanders to run as an independent. What he's saying isn't not true, not entirely untrue. The Democratic Party has definitely had some ridiculousness go on in this primaries, starting with the debate schedule, right? So there's no question that the Democratic Party has been anything but equitable in this race. Let's just put it nicely and really succinctly. Anything but equitable in this race. But, Donald Trump tweeting that is part exasperation with his own establishment, the GOP establishment, and part observation of reality of the Democratic establishment, but also opportunistic in that if he can convince, which he wouldn't be able to, right? Is he's just throwing seeds in the water for people like you and people like me to actually talk about it and spread it around, kind of like, I hate to say it, it's kind of like Jill Stein throwing salt in the game. That's the phrase I've been looking for a long time. It's been a while since I used that. But they essentially are throwing salt in the game for their own benefit, right? They want to pull away as many people as they can and get Bernie Sanders to either run as an independent or Bernie Sanders to join up with the Green Party. That's, game recognized game. So I understand the strategy, but I also, no. I understand the sentiment, but more importantly, I understand the strategy, particularly for Donald Trump, because if he wins the nomination, that's his free ride into the White House. Bernie Sanders does not win in a 3-way race. Hillary Clinton does not win in a three-way race. Donald Trump wins in a 3-way race. So, you got to take it with a grain of salt. But the only reason I'm actually spending any time on it is because if the GOP establishment is foolish enough to have a contested convention and push Donald Trump out, Donald Trump better run third party. And if Donald Trump runs third party, I personally would advocate to the top of my lungs for Bernie Sanders to run as a 4th party ticket, because then and only then would we be able to see a real choice for the American president. Only then will we see more than this binary choice where everyone has to be lumped together into two big tents, and our differences are so big that at times like this in the primaries, we really question whether or not we should ever be associated with them in the first place. So if Donald Trump gets booted out of the GOP nomination and has it stolen from him, then Donald Trump, he should be the first one to make the move, and he should run as a third party. And then I think anybody in their right mind would advocate. At that point, I wouldn't care about the outcome of the election as much as I would care about the precedent that would set for a more than two-party system. And so there are two victims. There's two groups of victims in this, right? There's potentially victims if a Republican wins and so on social issues. There are victims that will come out from a Republican presidency, right? You can deny it. I won't. It's clear as day, particularly on social issues. Boom, that's one. But the real victims of a four-party race, a four-way race, is the two-party system. Now, there's going to be people who don't want to take those odds. That's your prerogative. But me, if you want to see, let's have a four-party. Let's have a four-way race. That would be unprecedented. And actually, let me think hard now. I have to think through American history. American history is long. I'm trying to think, has there ever been a four-way race at any time I can't think of a time that there's been a four-way race at the top of my head, but I'll ask Professor Kaye when he comes on. Rhode Island just got called for Bernie Sanders. All right, so let's look at those numbers and I'll finish that thought. Rhode Island just got solidly for Bernie Sanders, and the numbers right now are 57%, a commanding margin in Rhode Island. So again, we want to take a look at the numbers, the delegate count as it comes from tonight. Now, in terms of this potential four-way race, and it's really at this point, it's a thought experiment, but it's a thought experiment that has a lot of potential, especially if the Republican Party runs headlong into undermining the will of the people, the will of the Republican electorate. Donald Trump, to me, would have a duty to his supporters to run as a third-party ticket. See how that works? See how that works as you try to put that moral responsibility on somebody and you try to project onto them. That's what Donald Trump was doing today. Donald Trump was trying to project something that's going to be positive for his political outcome onto Bernie Sanders. I'm just returning the favor. Donald Trump, you would be less than a leader. You would be less than this populist hero that Republicans believe you to be if you do not run as a third-party independent candidate, if the Republican Party ignores the voices of their electorate. You would be doing a great disservice, not only to your people, not only to yourself, but to your role in American history. You owe it to yourself and to your place in American history to run as a third-party candidate if the Republican GOP establishment undermines your victories. There you go. And then at that point, I would definitely rally for Bernie Sanders. Let's get that four-way race running and make this one of the most pivotal, game-changing elections in American history. All right. In other news, while we wait on, I believe so far we're down to only state that's outstanding is the one that's pretty close. Connecticut. Connecticut is still 50.2% for Bernie Sanders, 47.9%. The margin spread just a little, but it's still definitely too close to call. 33.3% reporting in Connecticut. So that's really all we're waiting on tonight. This is a short night. The night of 5 states ended pretty early with Trump making a clean sweep, Clinton winning Maryland, Delaware, Pennsylvania, Bernie Sanders winning Rhode Island, and Bernie Sanders in the lead in Connecticut. All right. So in other news, I want to play, if I can play this clip of Ted Cruz. Actually, I have 2 clips, and I'm going to try to get them both playing for you. But this is a clip of Ted Cruz and his new approach to fighting Donald Trump. He has made his bed, figuratively speaking, with the evangelical vote, and he's gone full-fledged attack mode against Donald Trump because Donald Trump had the nerve to speak negatively. He didn't outright attack it, but he spoke negatively of the North Carolina ban on transgendered Americans using the restrooms that they identify as for the gender that they identify. And so Ted Cruz has used this as an opportunity to attack Donald Trump vehemently. And so I want to play this clip, and it is from American Bridge. They actually captured it. So I want to play this clip, and I want you to hear what he's saying to this reporter, essentially saying that he believes that they should, transgendered Americans, they have a right to be transgendered, but if they want to use the bathroom, they have to use the bathroom in private. This obsession that they have is disgusting. It's both disgusting and fascinating at the same time. All right, so here is Ted Cruz in an interview on the 23rd, discussing his beliefs on transgender rights.
And let me point out, listen, every one of us has the right to live our lives as we wish. If any one of us wants to dress up as a woman or man, wants to live as a woman or man, believes that we might be something other than what we were born, God has made each of us with free will and the ability to choose to do that. If a man wants to dress as a woman and live as a woman and to have a bathroom at home.
So then they shouldn't use the bathroom out in public?
You don't have a right to intrude upon the rights of others, because whether or not a man believes he's a woman, there are a lot of women who would like to be able to use a public restroom in peace without having a man there and when there are children involved. Amen. You don't have a right to impose your lifestyle on others.
All right, so that's Ted Cruz, basically with the same talking point that most Republicans have at this point, with regard to the North Carolina, not only just North Carolina, right? This type of legislation is spreading across the country, and the purpose of the legislation is not only discriminatory, but it's also attacking the individual states and local cities and municipalities to create their own type of non-discrimination codes, right? So it prevents the localities from making their own individual laws. There's a particular word for the local law. I can't think of it right now, but you know exactly what I'm talking about. It prevents them from doing that. And it imposes from the state level down to all of the city levels one code, and this exact code is discriminatory. So here's Ted Cruz in front of this press conference, using this as an opportunity really to attack Donald Trump. And this is something that jumped out what Donald Trump said. He said, not Donald Trump, but this is Ted Cruz saying of Donald Trump. He said, if Donald Trump dresses up as Hillary Clinton, he still can't use the little girl's restroom. This is what it boils down to. This is what it's coming to. Listen, well, I don't have to say it again. I've said it plenty of times. You guys may think that Ted Cruz is no worse than anyone else in this race. I firmly believe that Ted Cruz is by far the worst and the most dangerous person running, not only because of he himself, but mainly because of the type of sentiment that he fosters and the people who rally behind him and that religious zealotry. And I also want to play this. I have a clip here of this North Carolina representative at State Senator Buck Newton. He was at a pro HB2 rally, and that's the legislation. Mind you, this legislation was voted on by, I believe, 11 Democrats. 5 of those Democrats endorsed Hillary Clinton. So when everyone says unite blue, which blue? Which blue are we uniting behind? But right now, let me just play what this guy said. This is the Senator Buck Newton. He's at a rally in North Carolina, and the
record straight.
Hang on, hang on. Let me adjust the volume here. Let's see if I can get right at the point. Here's Buck Newton.
Now I didn't see.
Actually, he already said it. So he says it at the very beginning. Listen closely. Here we go.
The record straight.
Okay, this video sucks. Senator Buck Newton, state senator from North Carolina, basically said let's keep North Carolina straight. Let's keep our state straight. Statements like this might fall on deaf ears to some people, and you might say this is feigned outrage. But when this type of rhetoric comes from people who have the ability to pass legislation, and they have passed legislation that outright discriminates, that codifies discrimination, then you have to listen with more intently. You have to listen to what they're saying. And there is this, the culture wars were never won. That's what I think I want to say most of all. The culture wars were never won. There have been some victories, but it is far from over. And I just, North Carolina seems to be the flashpoint. Ironically, and I'm listening to a lot of people talk about North Carolina, Republicans are now, you have a group of Republicans who are upset at big business for big businesses coming down on North Carolina. And you have some Republicans, mainly rank and file, not even rank and file, I'm sorry, the constituency. You have them upset with their Republican establishment because the establishment is kowtowing to these big businesses that are demanding that the state lift this ban. Like the NBA is talking about not coming. You have Amazon, you have PayPal, you have all these organizations that are going to essentially boycott North Carolina. And the people, the people are like, why aren't our elected officials defending North Carolina? North Carolina should have the right to be bigoted, essentially. And the Republican leadership is in some ways divided. Half of them are like Senator Buck Newton saying ridiculous things like, let's keep North Carolina straight. And the other half are trying to see how they can salvage their relationship with businesses. And so there's a divide in the Republican Party. And this is just a microcosm in North Carolina. But this type of divide is happening all across the country where the tent was too big. The Republican tent was too big to maintain the religious zealots, the evangelicals, and those who are just scared of everything, right? Some of them aren't evil people. They're just scared of everything. And then those who are so focused on business that whatever business says, that's what they're going to do. And now Republicans, the base, they realize whatever business says, that's what their leadership is going to do. And they're catching wind of that. And that's creating a deeper fissure. That's creating a deeper divide in the Republican Party. So I'm really fascinated to see how this plays out. I think all of that is going to play into who they're going to nominate. This is going to play directly into how willing they are to have a contested convention. And if they have a contested convention, Donald Trump has a duty to his followers to run third party. All right, let's see if there are any updates. We only had one state left. Again, if you're just joining us, the results so far coming out of Delaware is Clinton. Maryland is Clinton. Maryland was very dominant. Hillary Clinton has won with, right now it's only 3.5% reporting. But right now in Maryland, Hillary Clinton has a 66-30 lead, a 36-point lead in Maryland. And she also took Pennsylvania, where she had a 15-point lead. Bernie Sanders took Rhode Island. All right. With that being said, we're getting ready to shift gears, and I want to talk about the future of progressivism. And in that conversation, I want to reach out to Professor Harvey Kaye. I'm going to get him in on the conversation very shortly. And I want you, after this, I also want you to get involved. You can join the conversation, 857-600-0518. What do you think? What do you think about what do you think about the future? What do you think about the results from tonight? Do you think Bernie Sanders has a chance of coming back? I don't know. I want to know your point. I want to know what you think. And hang on a second, guys. Seem to be having a little difficulty here connecting. Right now I'm connecting with Professor Kaye. There we go.
Hey.
Professor Kaye, how are you today?
Look at you. You always wear a tie. I feel terrible. I'm so underdressed.
No problem. I actually have you live on the air. Yeah, sometimes I wear a tie, Professor Kaye. Sometimes I don't.
They can't see us, but we can see each other. Is that it?
Well, they can see you as soon as I click this button. So when you're ready to go.
Okay.
Okay, there we go. Professor Kaye, thank you so much for joining me. I really, well, actually, let me just introduce you a little bit, and then I want you to do some introduction of yourself. For those of you who don't know Professor Kaye, he is a American historian and sociologist. He is currently the director of the Center for History and Social Change at the University of Wisconsin at Green Bay. He is author of several books, but the most recent book is the one that I've read of his, which is The Fight for the Four Freedoms. Professor Kaye, thank you so much for joining me. How are you tonight?
It's a pleasure, absolute pleasure. Even if I'm feeling a little unsettled by the returns, I was hoping for more than Rhode Island. Let's hope we get Connecticut for Bernie, and let's hope it's close in Pennsylvania.
Yeah,
and in that sense, can I say something before we turn to the book?
Yeah, absolutely.
I mean, you know, I've been listening to you. I liked everything you said, by the way.
Thank you.
And what I want to tell people, because I assume our audience is the Progressive Army, right? I want to tell people that progressives don't threaten to leave the country. They don't threaten to turn their backs on politics. Real progressives remember that history is not made in a single election. Okay, that the point here is to secure as much as we can in this campaign, and hoping in hopes of sending Bernie Sanders empowered to Washington. The best scenario is he gains the nomination, but even if he doesn't gain the nomination, the fact is we send him empowered to Washington. We imagine a coalition of truly progressive senators, and those progressive senators continue to encourage us. And later, I know you want to talk about the future of progressivism, but I want to tell everyone, it burns me up when I see progressives threatening to take the marbles and go home, so to speak, if they don't win this election. I mean, people are forgetting just how far we have come in this 1 year. So please, everyone, just remember, if you're progressives, you don't act like children. I just tweeted something. Think historically, not anally. And I mean that.
Okay, so let's unpack that a little bit, because you have a lot of progressives who are and what would you consider them walking away, right? Because you have some progressives who just quite frankly could never see themselves supporting Hillary Clinton. It's not that they can't get their way with Bernie Sanders, so they want to walk away, but it's a moral decision for them, and they feel like they just simply can't vote for Hillary Clinton. What do you say to
I understand that if someone believes that morally they cannot, that's their prerogative. Okay. But I've seen people say, I won't live in a country where Bernie Sanders isn't president. Or I've seen remarks like, I give up, not simply on the Democratic Party, on American politics, it's all fixed. Right. You know, here's something to remember. You know, for decades upon decades, for 200 and however many years it's been since 1976, it has been the case that we have had innumerable inadequate presidents, inadequate campaigns, corrupt politics. We've excluded African Americans from part of those campaigns. The point is that democracy is not just a process. Democracy is an aspiration, and we continue the struggle. And if for some of those people it means voting green for Jill Stein, more power to them. If it means they stay inside the Democratic Party and they do everything they can to get hold of the decision making and hold of the levers of power, that's great too. But it's those folks that I see saying, oh, you know, they're writing it all off. That burns me up no end.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, though, you know, and that's one of the things that I really with the Bernie or bust movement, for instance, it's the feeling now, and I have people who are constantly trying to convince me of otherwise, but I still have the feeling that Bernie or bust is, for some people, disengagement. And it's that disengagement that is going to keep the conditions exactly the same way it is today, so that when the next progressive comes around, that they are going to face some of the same challenges. And I like what you said in terms of grabbing hold of the levers of power, grabbing hold of the establishment, and even if you can't vote with the Democratic Party, empower the Green Party, empower somebody instead of disengaging. And so I definitely hear what you're saying, but I would you convey this in how have you been able to convince people that disengagement is the wrong way to go in this kind of scenario?
Well, let me tell you a little story. I don't know if it fits exactly, but I've been thinking about this last couple of years. I had a student here at the University of Wisconsin, Green Bay, who was a movement guy, and he said basically voting was irrelevant, and which reminded me of a set of words I saw on a train trestle in England, written by anarchists. It said, "If voting mattered, they'd outlaw it." Okay. Well, I thought about all of the folks who gave their lives to the struggle for the right to vote, and that goes all the way back to the workers' parties and women's rights organizations and African Americans and Native Americans and others. And I thought, okay, so let's suppose your individual vote doesn't matter. The fact is that you turn out to vote, and I don't even call it a civic duty, it reduces it. It's a civic moment. And you figure out that you're there with all your fellow citizens. That's a moment of empowerment, not simply by the fact that you're voting, but you're turning out with your fellow citizens. And we've got to start figuring out that that's a moment that we need to reproduce in other contexts. We need to remember that we need to create solidarities among ourselves. And turning our backs on the fundamental question of voting is not the way to do it. Well, anyhow, this student of mine ended up getting deeply involved in the effort to block a Walmart coming into downtown Green Bay, and he led this campaign, and he succeeded.
Wow.
And he discovered that he succeeded in part because he was addressing his fellow citizens as voters, not only as people who would turn out to try and block Walmart. He went off to graduate school. He's in graduate school now, studying labor relations, with the idea of either going into labor organizing or actually quite possibly going into politics. And he actually wrote to me and said, "Where should I begin my political career? Do I run for state? If I come back to Wisconsin, do I run for state assembly? Do I go for broke and a higher thing?" But here's a guy who all of a sudden is both movement and voter, what do they call it? Electoral politics. And that's what we have to remember. It isn't just a matter of winning the election. It's also a matter of movement politics. And we have to figure out where we're going, how we're going to recreate those movements. I mean, if I talk about the labor movement, I know the labor movement's up against the wall. There's so much up against the wall that most labor leaders and labor unions, including my own, which was, I'm convinced that they had asked all of us, we would have said endorse Bernie. They jumped to endorse Hillary Clinton. Yeah. The civil rights movement, is there even a civil rights movement? There are civil rights organizations, and Black Lives Matter, however, is the group that's really putting back on the agenda the imperative of racial equality and racial justice. But these things are happening out there. And what we need to do is have, we have to embrace movement politics, but also not fail to embrace electoral politics. Yeah. And let's not forget, we have come so far. We have won primaries. I'm in the state of Wisconsin. Yep. Here in the state of Wisconsin, we have one of the most reactionary governors and legislators going, Scott Walker and the Republicans. But this is also a state in which Bernie Sanders mobilized people and won very nicely in the primary. I can tell you that my students, 18 to 30-year-olds, almost every one of them, whether they were white, Black, Latino, they wanted Bernie. And these are young people who are coming up, and middle-aged and older folks who are getting so angry, and say, well, if we don't win, I'm going, I'm turning my back.
That's interesting.
Too impatient. We've got a whole generation of young Sanderistas, I think that's the term that's going around these days.
Let me drill down on some of that.
Hopeful, even if we lose.
Yeah. Let me drill down on some of that, because you've actually said quite a bit there that I think is very pertinent.
Yeah, I'm off on a rant. Sorry.
No. I appreciate that. I always appreciate a great rant. But so the engagement of or that synergy, or not even the synergy, but that fine mix, the proper mix between activism, movement, and then politics, right? Because it seems like we, to a certain extent, the more progressive people tend to neglect that political component. We are activists by nature. There are movements that have survived the DLC, that have just survived the shift to the right that the Democratic Party. There are a lot of there's so much activism and grassroots movements that have survived all that. But now, that next step is to gain control of the political reins. And if we do that, it sounds like what you're saying is that's what's missing from our calculus.
Okay, let me I mean, at this rate, which is fine by me. We can talk about my book another night if we want to talk politics
that's
tonight.
fine.
That's great. So here's the thought, okay? In 2012 election approached, I wrote a piece for Salon, and I said, now is the time for the labor leadership to call for a new march on Washington, so that after Obama wins the White House, we march on Washington and start making our voices heard.
Wow.
It strikes me that instead of everyone saying, oh, it's all over if it has to be Hillary Clinton, and look, I want Bernie, and I'm hoping something happens that enables that to take place. But even if Bernie wins, Bernie doesn't promise us that he's going to make things happen. He says anything that happens is going to depend on Americans standing up, stepping forth.
Absolutely.
Well, similarly, if Hillary Clinton wins or Bernie Sanders wins, I say we need a march on Washington with the idea of a celebration of democracy, and in which these diverse movements, which are plentiful, Fight for 15, Black Lives Matter, Moral Monday, the anti-fracking movement, there's a shared purpose in all of this. And the shared purpose in all of this is to redeem America and build a new America.
Right.
And whether it's Bernie or Hillary, we still have to do it.
Right.
We still have to do it.
Right. So yeah. I absolutely agree with that, in the sense that the battle is so far from over. The battle. Here's the other thing that you said that really stood out the most to me. And I don't know if people really give progressivism the credit. We have come so far in not just this year, but I would say since 2010. Since 2010, we have shifted so far. The national conversation, the Overton window, has been expanded finally to include some left-leaning discussions that we were not even having in the 90s, right? In the 90s, we were just moving so far away from anything that was progressive, any type of social programs, everything that was big government. This is the end of the era of big government, right? But now finally, we've started this conversation with Occupy Wall Street, just that activism in. And now we have someone who's actually moving that activism into an actual political campaign, generating millions of dollars in contributions, millions of individual donors, really showing us the potential and the potency of the progressive movement. And I feel like that some people are simply going to walk away from this, when this is the time for us to double down, in my opinion. What do you think?
If we, it's like one of these things staring us in the face.
Yeah.
Staring us in the face. A year ago, who would have fantasized that Bernie Sanders was the most liked politician in America in the year ahead?
Nobody.
Right?
Nobody.
The most liked. I can tell you that I had students who, when I first knew them as freshmen, they were committed conservative Republicans. And whether they were libertarian or religious conservatives, who in the course of this past year have told me they want Bernie Sanders. Why? Because they're coming to recognize what's going on in America. And if we older folks, you're young, but if we older folks start talking, those of us who are for Bernie, we start talking about, well, I've had it and all that, we're basically wasting a whole generation's energy.
Yeah.
We need to cultivate their social democratic, if you prefer, democratic socialist instincts.
Yeah.
Their lives, our lives, depend on rallying around this question and sustaining this movement. Look, Bernie Sanders said in interviews regularly, I remember one in particular with John Nichols in The Nation, he said, I'm not a liberal. I'm a democratic socialist. And the campaign that I'm going to run is intended as a political revolution. Now, he knew when he said that, it wasn't like overnight you were going to accomplish all of these things. Right. Hell, even if you had democratic majorities, it wouldn't have been accomplished in one night.
Right.
But what he has done, in the course of this, is he made certain words part of our vocabulary.
Right.
Yeah. Democratic socialist, political revolution, inequality, campaign finance reform. I'm 66 years old. And this is the first time in my life that I didn't have to hold my nose even in a primary, I think. I mean, it's really that astounding to me. Who would have imagined, especially 18 to 39, 40-year-olds, talking about voting for some 74-year-old Jewish socialist who grew up in Brooklyn and represents the state of Vermont.
Right.
I mean, this is an extraordinary year.
You know what? I thank you. First of all, let me say thank you. And a couple of the people in the chat room are in our private chat room are saying thank you as well, because you're really putting it in a context that I think is so often missed. And I think I even missed it, right? That we really aren't considering the significant gains. And actually, I've been thinking about this in terms of Bernie Sanders. Like the way I see it with Bernie Sanders is like he's really taking it on the chin. He's taking it on the chin for progressivism, and he's introducing things back into the national conversation that have never been in the national conversation in my lifetime.
Right.
And we finally are having a conversation about left-leaning, some balance, right? We're finally bringing America back into some, and we're not there. We're so far from being there,
not there.
But he's given us the language, like you said, he's given us the vocabulary, and he's giving us the energy and the model. I mean, we can't neglect the fact of what he's done. And so looking at the model that he set, what do you see? I'm not going to tiptoe around it. It's going to be almost impossible for Bernie Sanders to win as much as I want him to win. Let's say he doesn't win. What do you want to see as the next step? What do you think is the best way for us to move forward?
Okay. Well, first of all, I do want Bernie to go all the way to the convention.
Okay.
And I want him, as Donald Trump would say, to cut deals. I want deals made.
Yep.
I mean, the deal that I fantasize about most, I was reading somebody, I don't know if it was in Huffington Post or somewhere, said Bernie ought to ask for the Democratic majority leadership in the Senate.
Okay.
Make it that clear. And even if he doesn't get that, he should demand. I mean, he's already a leader in the Senate for the Democrats, even though he hasn't been a Democrat. He's been an independent working in the Democratic caucus. He needs himself to position himself in a fundamentally a spokesperson-like way.
Yeah.
And in that fashion, folks, look, the Democratic senators themselves disappointed me. I wanted Elizabeth Warren to endorse him. Durbin, all these folks didn't do what they should do. But that doesn't mean they're not progressives. And it doesn't mean they can't encourage political action.
Okay.
But here's the other thing. Bernie, and this distinguishes him from Hillary Clinton in a far more fundamental way, even, believe it or not, than a policy way. And it's this. Hillary Clinton, over and over again, from the moment she launched her campaign at Four Freedoms Park, and we'll get to Four Freedoms next time over and over again, she has said, I want to be your champion. I want to fight for you. Even last week when she was doing her victory speech for the New York primary, it said underneath on the podium, fighting for us.
Right.
Now, one of the beauties of Bernie Sanders' campaign, and it echoes a Rooseveltian, Franklin Roosevelt kind of politics, is he's not telling you, I want to fight for you. He was basically encouraging the fight in you. And Bernie has been encouraging the fight in us. And in that sense, the trick is, how can Bernie and whoever else is alongside of him, the state senators and other folks and the movement people, how can they continue to sustain that sense of encouraging the fight in us? Okay.
Yeah.
Now, maybe once the campaign is settled, and again, let's hope for Bernie, but let's realistically face the fact that it's going to be Hillary. Maybe then Labor can rediscover itself because they've seen all this young and youthful energy. Maybe the civil rights movement will all the more embrace Black Lives Matter, and we can start bringing all of these things together in some. There doesn't have to be called a grand coalition. It's that we march together. We march together.
I love what you just said. That Bernie is encouraging the fight in us. That is that's something
that's been my motto for the past year. That's why I love Bernie.
Yeah, no, it's been so fascinating to see the amount of people, the numbers of people that are actually as progressive, if not further progressive than even Sanders. And Sanders has been giving voice to that. And he's taken it. And I keep going back to that imagery where he's really taken it on the chin for us to come out and be as bold progressives as he's been throughout. We're just catching up with him in terms of his politics. He's been pretty consistent over the years.
Yes.
He's been very consistent over the years. And I love that imagery that he's encouraging the fight inside of us instead of saying, I want to be your spokesperson. Even when he says, I can't do this alone, right? I can go to DC, I could win, and I still can't get it done because it's something that has to come from you. What do you say to the opposite side of the equation? Those people who fear that fight, because that fight that's inside of us is very powerful, and it can come into conflict with the reigning paradigm in the Democratic Party. And you have a very strong force coming from the opposite side of this Democratic left leaning that wants to suppress that. What do you say when we want to them? What do you say directly to them? And then two, what do you say to those of us who are suffering the brunt of their backlash?
Okay, the hardest thing for people to do is take the first step. And sometimes you take the first step and the struggle you're involved in fails. I have to tell you that I found the greatest democratic moment of my maturity, my sort of, let's say, post 50 years of age time, was when Scott Walker and the Republicans took away the collective bargaining rights for public employees here in the state of Wisconsin. It was a major act of class war from above. Mm-hmm. And maybe you don't even know, most people don't, that Wisconsin was the first state in 1959 to grant public employees collective bargaining rights. That is, unionization with collective bargaining rights. I mean, that was a major thing. And here we were 50 and we lost it. Now, we lost it. Why did we lose it? Not simply because the Republicans pushed their agenda, but because the Democrats have for too long failed to act like Democrats in the Roosevelt tradition. Yeah. They have repeatedly acted more like Democrats in the Carter tradition. Mm-hmm. Sweetness without willingness to support progressive causes. Or, Democrats in the Clinton tradition. Yeah. We have a bit of time, right? Because I want to tell a little story about Bill Clinton. When Bill Clinton was elected in 92, and I wasn't very keen. My candidate in 92 was Harkin of Iowa, and he didn't make it through to the nomination. But Bill Clinton ran, and he ran on the theme of change, hope and change. I know we've heard of that from all these Democrats, hope and change, except for Bernie. Didn't waste his time on that, okay? Talking about political revolution straightforwardly. Anyhow, so Bill runs, and he played quite often on the fact that his middle name is Jefferson, William Jefferson Clinton. Yeah. And at the time of his reenacted, or at least traveled the same path from Monticello, Virginia, Jefferson's home, to Washington, D.C., in order to give his inaugural address in January of 1993. And I was driving into campus and I was listening to his address. And I knew from his speech, it was all over. That we were never going to, that was all, now it sounds sick and cynical, I know. But what he did is he said to Americans, playing on that question of change, playing on the Jeffersonian image, he said, in every, what Thomas Jefferson said, he told us? In every generation, Americans need some change. But that's not what Thomas Jefferson said. Right. And by the way, I am fully aware of Jefferson's sins. The more important thing right now is Jefferson said, in every generation, Americans will need a rebellion. Mm-hmm. But Jefferson Clinton said change. And basically what he was saying is, leave it, we're elected, leave it to us, we'll take care of it. Yeah. Yeah. Okay. And then what did he do? He appointed Hillary Clinton to head a secret healthcare commission, or a private closed door healthcare commission, which basically blew the whole healthcare thing so that we wouldn't get healthcare expanded for an entire generation. Now, having said that, Barack Obama did a similar thing. He told young people, yes, we can. And then he comes to Washington and his inaugural address, and I thought, oh no, not again. He said, the debacle I'm paraphrasing, the debacle we confront right now is the fault of all of us. Right. Well, that was definitely not true. Okay. Definitely not true. Moreover, I thought for a moment that we were going to see some real, intellectual bravery in his inaugural address in 2009. Most people don't realize that Barack Obama quoted Thomas Paine. the great American pamphleteer and revolutionary,
right,
who said, we have it in our power to begin the world over again, who said, the cause of America is the cause of all mankind.
yeah,
The sun never shone on a cause of greater worth, that kind of stuff.
yeah,
Well, but he never used Thomas Paine's name.
yeah, yeah.
Okay, which indicated his fear, perhaps, of alienating evangelicals who, might have held, a grudge against Paine because he was a deist and not a Christian. Well, what we need in this time of ours is not to let Bernie Sanders fail to speak at the convention, and to speak to us in a way that, even if it's an endorsement of Hillary Clinton, reminds us that the future is in our hands, that politics is our responsibility, that movements must literally struggle to enhance American democracy. One of the great things about Americans that we too often forget is that when we confront real crises, and I understand the tragedy and the irony of American history, but the fact is we have made incredible strides, but not simply by sticking to our guns, but rather we are at our best when we enhance American democracy. In the face of crisis, we carry out revolutions. In 1776, in the Civil War, in the 1930s, in World War II, in the 1960s. And he should remind us of that. And by the way, I'm going off a little bit on this. That's been my greatest frustration with Bernie Sanders.
Unpack that for me.
That he's failed to remind Americans of every generation, not just who they are, but that they are Americans with a rich, radical, and progressive tradition. And to say to them, look, do you know why it is that you're angry about things? It's because you carry a deep cultural memory of the revolution, of the struggle for emancipation, of the struggle for social democratic politics in the 1930s. I mean, that's what I was so eager to hear him say. And by the way, I'm absolutely convinced that some of those folks who go racing over to the Trump side with that slogan, "Make America Great Again," that we could have pulled them to our side, "Make America Great and Good Again." Okay.
Okay, let me jump in there because
sorry, I went off. Again, I mean, I'm just riled tonight because I'm riled by the fact that we're not taking the states that I want, but I'm also riled by the fact that progressives are getting too cynical, and I don't like that.
Yeah. In terms of let me just give the update in terms of the Connecticut. Connecticut is 49.8 for Bernie Sanders, 48.3 for Hillary Clinton. So it's still very close. You've said more than I can actually unpack right now. I do remember.
By the way, thank you for giving me this airtime.
Oh, no problem. My pleasure. I enjoyed your book, and I enjoyed the comment. We can always talk about your book because I want to have you back. But I do remember Barack Obama using those exact words. I did not connect that with Thomas Paine. So I do understand why there could be some some hesitation in using Thomas Paine's name. But some of the things that you're
and just Ben, don't forget, he had as his religious champion there was Rick Warren.
Yeah.
The evangelical from Colorado.
All the more reason.
Well, I would have at least he could have done is talked about Thomas Paine in terms of separation of church and state and all that kind of stuff. But sorry, I cut you off.
Yeah, no. I'm just trying to recap. I should have been taking notes. So this is what it's like to be in one of your classes.
Harvey Kaye rants again.
I have a comment here. Let's see. We sent our hard notes, but we are organizing and building. A comment from the chat room says that that we may be cynical right now, but we are organizing and we are building. And I think a message like what you're bringing is something that that really can bring it back into focus, because I see an opportunity. And that's one of the things that I'm trying to convey. I keep asking who's going to show up after November 8th. I want to see the people who are going to show up on November 9th. The people who show up for duty on November 9th, those are the revolutionaries. Those are the people who are going to help us to change this, not the people who take their marbles and go home, for lack of a better phrase. There might be a period of disappointment and mourning, but we have to get right back up and get back to work, because the things that you're pointing out, they're motivating, right? And I know it's not really about the motivation, but when you're faced with a primary loss, when you're faced with this type of disillusionment, You know, people really need to hear, especially from a historical perspective, that what we're doing is not only the right thing, but it's consistent with our tradition as Americans. It's consistent with everything that we do. When we come across a hurdle, if we need a revolution, we're willing to do that. And we have done that. So listen, thanks so much for coming on. I want to give you, I mean, I could probably go on and on and on about what you said. I want to get you back to discuss your book, but I want to give you the last word to give a message to progressives who may be disillusioned. You've been doing that all night, but I want you to summarize it into a nice sound bite for them to remember. Give us something to go on to all the progressives who may be feeling down.
Okay, here's the thing. Just think of these dates: 1776, 1865. 1935, 1945, 1965. The American Revolution, the end of the Civil War, and the making of the 13th, and soon enough, the 14th and 15th Amendments. 1935, Social Security and the National Labor Relations Act. Think 1945, the victory over fascism and imperialism. Think 1965, in 64, the Civil Rights Act, in 65, the Voting Rights Act. We did it. We may not win every election. We can redeem America.
Harvey, Professor Harvey Kaye, thank you so much for joining me. I definitely want to have you back as soon as possible. And thank you for putting encouragement in terms of a historical perspective. We may not win every.
I do look forward to our very next conversation, not too long away, I hope. I'm
looking forward to it as well. Thanks so much for joining me.
Thanks.
All right, folks, I have a few more minutes, 857-600-0518. At the very tail end, it sounds like the audio got bad between Professor Kaye and I, but the lines are open and we'll get the conversation going again. I want to hear from you. What do you think about what Professor Kaye said? What do you think about the primary results? What are you feeling? Sorry, Spreaker, for some reason it just it shut down on me at the beginning of Harvey Kaye's conversation. So I'm obviously going to stay up late tonight and upload the audio after the audio finishes, after the video finishes doing what it has to do. So I want to hear from you. Let's get these callers in the conversation. Caller, you're live on the air. What's your name, comment, and or question?
Yeah, oh man, Scotty from Columbus, Ohio. Been trying to get on for like the past couple of days.
Scotty, what's going on, man? How's it going?
Not much. I wanted to ask you, what's your opinion on like the radical left's failure to basically see what the Bernie Sanders candidacy, like the opening is giving him. Like, I'm of the mindset that he's playing the role of sheepdog this election. But even from my standpoint, I think that the issues that he's putting on the table, like single payer health care, you know, campaign finance reform, you know, just the fact that Palestinians are actually human beings. Like, even for a Democratic candidate to be saying that was, you know, it was just unbelievable, even from my standpoint of how I view him. And I think that a lot of these like sites didn't see it coming and didn't have his supporters, you know, give them a viable alternative, because the Green Party's had 2 decades to actually get its shit together and organize. And it's like, I respect a number of people who run in the Green Party, but I'll give you an example. Dennis Traynor Jr., you know him?
Nope, can't say that I do. That name escapes.
Okay, get him to Acronym TV. But he was Jill Stein's former press secretary.
Okay.
And he was talking to Siri X on his podcast.
Okay.
And the Green Party actually had their political convention last year in Ferguson, Missouri. And he asked him, did he know about this? And he said, I had no idea that I've been doing activism for a long time. And that's the problem. The Green Party has done a terrible job in terms of for the people that really could benefit from it. Okay, let me jump in there because you asked some critical questions. The first thing you asked is, what do I think? And you categorize it as the failure of the radical left. Let me give you this answer off the air.
I think everyone underestimated themselves. I think the radical left underestimated progressivism in general. Whatever you want to call it, liberalism, progressivism, democratic socialism, socialism in general. I think we underestimated not the spirit of it, but the power of it. Because who would have really thought that Bernie Sanders could, without big dollar donations, with an average donation of a small amount, without taking money from some of the same lobbyists and corporations that have manipulated the Democratic Party for a long time, who would have thought that Bernie Sanders could rival Hillary Clinton in the way that he has? Was it good enough? Tonight doesn't look like it was. But did he give her a run for her money? And did he shift her entire conversation to the left? Absolutely. Because everyone, including Bernie Sanders, and well, maybe not Bernie Sanders, but Hillary Clinton, people on the left, the black left, I think we underestimated the power of progressivism. I think we overestimated the Republican Party's scare tactics and red baiting and fear mongering and communism, socialism, Maoism, fascism, Leninism. I think we overestimated that and believed and psyched ourselves out into thinking that progressivism doesn't have a future. I think that's part of why the DLC was born in the first place, was because they couldn't imagine how to actually be progressives in the South. And at this point, when you look at what Bernie Sanders has done, I don't look at the radical left and say, and the black left and everyone else, and I don't look at them and blame it on them for not helping us close the deal. I think it's an awakening. I think that they were asleep at the wheel. I think they were asleep at the wheel because they felt as though this type of progressivism did not stand a snowball's chance in hell up against the DLC style democratic values of Hillary Clinton in a world that has been cast, in a narrative and a frame rather that has been cast by the Republican Party with the help of those Democrats. I think everyone was asleep at the wheel, including myself, because everyone came into this conversation about Bernie Sanders with, I really like him, I like what he stands for, but I don't think he can win. And then he showed us this is how you put together a campaign of small donors, of grassroots activists, of people across the nation. And this is what progressivism looks like. And then finally, people woke up, and I think we woke up a little too late. I would agree that if progressives and liberals and people on the far left and socialists in America and the people who normally affiliate with the Green Party, all those different groups, I think if we had saw the vision, if we knew back in June what we know now, I think it would have been I think we would be talking about President Bernie Sanders, but we didn't. And I think that's because we allowed Republicans to psych us out, conservatives to psych us out, and we allowed neoliberal Democrats to psych us out for a very long time. And now we see the power and the potential. You see the number of people who support this type of progressivism. And so now the question is, do we lay that down? Do we simply lay that down and say, well, you know, it didn't work out, so let's move on? No, absolutely not. I think every person who is upset, who's disillusioned, every person that's mad, every person that's angry, every person that wants to be Bernie or bust, every person who wants to go with Jill, chill with Jill, or whatever the slogan is, every person who is infuriated by this Democratic Party, I think give yourself a couple of days to be angry, and then show up for duty, because there is a coalition of progressives in America that most people did not know was this powerful, that could rival the Democratic Party, that could give the most popular woman candidate in the history of America a run for her money. I see potential. I see a future. I see what progressives can really do. and it's up to us to get it done. All right, folks. Thanks for joining me. I had a lot of other things that I wanted to go over. Let us just check these numbers out of Connecticut before we go. Connecticut, the final numbers are the numbers that are still coming in. For Connecticut, still has Bernie Sanders at, let me get this exact percentage for Bernie Sanders. Bernie Sanders at 49.6%, Hillary Clinton at 48.5%. So it looks like Bernie Sanders might pull us out. It's at 60% reporting. Let's see. I think we'll just keep an eye on it, but it looks like Bernie Sanders might hold on by a very slim margin. Again, Donald Trump has thumped the Republican Party across the board. He won Connecticut, Delaware, Maryland, Pennsylvania, and Rhode Island. Hillary Clinton had commanding leads in Maryland and in Pennsylvania, and Bernie Sanders has already taken Rhode Island. So that's what it looks like for tonight's Super Tuesday Part 4. I will see you guys tomorrow night. It's been a pleasure. If you like the Benjamin Dixon Show, I should have said this half an hour ago. I always forget because I'm more interested in doing the show than promoting the show. And that's my fault. I need to learn how to promote my own show. If you like the Benjamin Dixon Show, click the subscribe button. Follow us on Spreaker. Follow us on Twitter. If you really like what we're doing, become a patron. Support the show with $5 a month. Buy me a coffee. All this good stuff I give you, you could buy me a coffee. If everybody watching bought me a coffee, then we could do a whole lot more. Go to patreon.com/the BPD show and just buy me a coffee. One coffee a month. Or hell, buy me a shot of whiskey. $10 a month. The cheap stuff. I'll see you guys next time.
The Benjamin Dixon Show is only possible with listener support. Go to www.thebenjamindixonshow.com to register for our blog, join the Progressive Army, and support The Benjamin Dixon Show.
Crazy mother.
If you like this episode, be sure to share, like, and subscribe.
Consider becoming a Patreon. Go to www.patreon.com/the BPD show and support The Benjamin Dixon Show.